This morning, I'm going to be talking to you about having a grateful heart. And actually, I have been thinking about this quite a bit over the last few weeks coming up to this. And as I've been expanding sermons into series and things like that, one of the things I've made sure that we did was keep this gratitude one on this date because I've been wanting to talk about it, especially on the week of Thanksgiving. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't think gratitude is something we should be talking about all year long. I do believe that we should be. But we particularly definitely want to make sure that we put some emphasis and some strategy toward understanding a little bit better and practicing better this issue of gratitude. And so that's what we're going to do this morning. Thanksgiving, or words that are a derivative of Thanksgiving, are mentioned 140 times in the Bible. And that's just the word thanks or thank or Thanksgiving or Thanksgivings, those kind of words. That doesn't include praise, doesn't include honor and other kinds of things that might be associated with giving thanks. And so it's a common theme in the Bible. Because it's mentioned so much in so many different places, it's a little bit hard. There are some passages, I think, that do a lot of justice to the issue of Thanksgiving, but it's kind of, but at the same time, when you've pastored a church for over 21 years, we're into our 22nd year. I don't want to repeat those, and so really, what I've done this season, coming up to it, has been reflecting on what I believe the Bible as a whole says about gratitude and the impact and effect that it has on us and how that makes a difference in our lives. And so I've gathered my thoughts together as best as possible. I have this stool here. It's actually, I think, Jim's stool or somebody else, so you might want to grab it when you come back up. But if I forget, but just in case, because there's a sense in which what I'm going to share today is kind of just thoughts and things that I've had over the years, and I'm trying to collect those together and try to be reflective of what the Scripture teaches about these thoughts, these ideas, and where they've formed, how they've been encased from God's Word into my thinking, into my heart, and then if I could share that with you. So I hope it won't be random feeling. It doesn't. I've tried to put it together in somewhat of an orderly manner, but it is these thoughts about gratitude that I've tried to pull together and say, hey, if I could just sit down across the table with you with a cup of coffee, and we would talk about gratitude, these are some of the things that I would talk about. I'd be interested in talking about. I'd be interested in sharing with you. I'd be interested in hearing from you your thoughts about. And so, even though we may not be able to have that conversation exactly in that way here this morning, what I do want to say is that as much as possible, that's the mindset or the mode that I'm in here. And so I might end up sitting down and talking to you, but I might not, because sometimes it's a little hard for me to sit down. And I did have someone that was kind of critical of newer style churches, or churches that aren't that one time said to me, they said, well, I'll give you, they were kind of complaining about a couple things about some of the, I think we're not that faddish. I can tell you we're not faddish at all, but we're not. But they were complaining. They said, it's nobody that goes here, okay? But they said, well, at least you don't sit down and preach, So I was like, well, at least the times you visited or whatever, I didn't, but I do sometimes, occasionally, every once in a while. I didn't know. I mean, it seemed like to me that Jesus sat down in a boat, and he sat down in a few places and taught too. But unfortunately, I didn't think to mention that to him when I complained. But anyway, they weren't complaining at me. So I don't think it matters so much the posture, but anyway, so I just wanted to talk to you this morning about this issue of gratitude. And I want to tell you that I believe gratitude is so much more than words of thanks. It does involve words of thanks, very, very much so. But it's so much more than that. It actually is a spirit of thanks. It's a spirit of thanks. I've been paying attention, mentioned to a small group last night at prayer, that I had been paying a little bit of attention to my behavior the last few days regarding gratitude. And sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, but as much as I could, I tried to do that. And here's what I found out about me in that. and this isn't something you normally say about yourself, but I'm actually a fairly nice guy. I met this kind of nice guy, Rod. Because what I would do is, if someone was walking someplace and someone opened the door, I would go, and I'd catch it as I was doing it. It wasn't like I was premeditating this. It would happen because I was trying to make a conscious thought. And I would notice when they hold the door, I would go, "Thank you very much, sir." Now, I will tell you this, that if a lady holds the door open for me, I have a real hard time with that. And so I do generally say, "Thank you very much for that gesture of kindness. Here, let me hold the door. You go ahead." And because I had two aunts that were several years older than me, and they beat it in my head. Don't ever walk in front of a lady. Don't ever go. Don't ever let a lady hold the door open for you. That kind of stuff. So it's really hard. It feels like I'm doing something really bad if I do that. But if I do have my arms full and you're holding the door, I will walk through and I will say thank you. But anyway, I found out I say thank you a lot. I'd walk across at a parking lot and people would stop or whatever, and I would wave at them like, "Thank you, thank you." And as long as people were driving the way I thought they ought to be driving in traffic, I noticed that I was like, fairly nice even in that setting. And so I'm thinking, man, you're just a nice guy, Rod. You're pretty nice. You're polite. And that, you say, well, people who aren't polite, people who aren't that way, they probably don't have a sense of gratitude. But gratitude's more than just being a nice person. It's more than a person who has learned to be polite. Those are good things. It's not a bad thing at all. But it's where in our heart we're truly grateful. We just have the compelling sense that there are things that we are so deeply grateful for. It grips us. And it's more than just the politeness, just going through the motions, because I would say if I followed you guys around, I would think, wow, you're a really polite person too. This is a nice person here. And so I think all of us would fit in that category. But I'm not just talking about just being a nice person. That's great. I like that. And I think it's a good thing. Or just being a polite person. I'm talking about a person who deeply is settled into understanding that there are some things in life that we realize we don't deserve, we didn't do anything to earn, and we're grateful. We just have this awareness of gratitude. And I believe that gratitude thrives where humility and contentment dwell. If you want to know where's a good planting place for gratitude to grow, it's in the soil of humility and contentment. And I think it's really hard if we don't have a true sense of humility and a true sense of contentment. It's really hard not to be grateful. If you have those things, you will be a grateful person. And then I saw this quote, and I didn't catch who it was from, but I liked it very much. It says, "Gratitude is so simple and yet profoundly refreshing." How many times have you bought something, say, for your children, and they forgot to say thank you? They just assumed because they were such a nice guy or they such a good kid that they deserved it or something, or they just forgot. And so somewhere along the line you go, "Do you have anything to say for your new toy?" Oh yeah, thank you. Well, that's because you're training them to be thankful for things. But isn't it nice when you didn't have to say anything at all to them, and they just look at you and say, "Thank you so much for buying that for me. Thank you for giving that to me. Thank you for doing that for me. Thank you." That's where it really touches our hearts, because we know it's something they remembered to do, something that they felt themselves. It's so simple, and it's so refreshing when it happens. And so it's not, this is not something you have to spend a lot of money on. So this morning, I'm not trying to sell you a bill of goods. It's something you got to go make this big investment in. This is something that will add massive quality to your life and to other people's lives, and it doesn't cost you a dime. And so I'm encourage you to embrace it very much so. I'm going to give you 3 different categories of topics about this, and the first one is that gratitude. When someone has gratitude, it's an indication that they have certain awarenesses. It tells us something about somebody. When the person is a grateful person, it goes ahead and indicates some things about them. And the first one is this: an awareness that life is a gift. I believe if you do not think that life is a gift, you probably won't be a grateful person. But if you acknowledge and believe that life is a gift, then you probably will be a grateful person. Think about this. Genesis 1:26 says that God made us in his own image. We are God-like. We're not God, but we are God-like. We are made in his image. We have certain characteristics about us that are reflective of who God is. And that's the reason why you have the great brain that you have. That's the reason why you have the capacity to love that you have. It's the reason that you have the skill set, the ability to think through problems and solve them, is because we are made in God's image. And so there's a reflection of God in who we are. That's not said of any other created being or any other created thing. It is only said of mankind. And so whenever you have an awareness that life is a gift, it changes how you live your life. And when you understand that the way you are and the things about you that are so remarkable, that are so outstanding, are because you are God-like. God created you in his image, created me in his image. Then Psalm 139, verse 14 says, and you probably have heard this different times, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And what that means, I think it reflects back to the fact that God has had his hand in who you are as a person. That's one of the things that the Psalm says. God directly involves himself with you becoming who you are. You are stamped with the image of God, but you're also stamped with some unique characteristics and qualities about yourself that God has determined you would have. You know, and we live in a culture of high comparison, where people compare themselves to each other, compare ourselves to people who are very successful in different ways. And often, if we're not careful, we can go through our life wishing we were somebody else, or wishing we had what somebody else has, or had the opportunity, or took advantage of the opportunities, or whatever. We will go through life with a sense of regret that we're not somebody else. But whenever we understand that God made you exactly as he wants you to be, he made you exactly as he designed you to be. And he is interested, intricately interested in every detail of your life. It starts making a difference. And we realize the things that sometimes we'd like to get rid of. I'm not talking about bad habits or things like that, but the characteristics of who we are the things God wants to use. And we embrace that, and we're grateful for them. Jesus himself said this. He said that he came that we might have life. And he came that we might not only have life, but we would have life to the full. Life to the full. And it's extremely important for us to know and to understand that if we're going to have life to the full, it comes from God. And many times we live a subpar life. We live below the level that God wants us to live. But he said, I want you to live. I want you to maximize on life. I want you to maximize on it. And so life is not just worth living, but it's rich with texture and detail. There's dynamics that are very much a part of our life that we need to embrace. Now, think about how you're made physically. You know, it's funny, whenever we see a little baby, we see their hand. We're amazed at that little hand because it's very small, but it's perfect. I think we have a brand new baby here this morning, don't we? You guys just stand up and we'll acknowledge that, if you don't mind. Is she asleep there? She is. Okay. Don't make you. Anyway, let's congratulate these guys on Betty. Awesome. Amazing gift. But you look at those little hands, and they're delicate and they're small, but they're perfect. They're perfect. I mean, if you look at your hand and you think about all the things that it is capable of doing, all the things that it is possible to make happen, and think of all the other characteristics of this physical being that you have. It's very, very important, very, very important for us to understand that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and to be grateful for it. Think of all the things that we can do. And then what makes me sometimes feel challenged is whenever you meet somebody who is handicapped and they're missing a limb or they're missing some other things that we all have and we kind of take advantage of, take for granted, and yet they do such an amazing job with their spirit, their attitude, and their excellence in what they pursue. And it just tells us that our heart attitude, our gratitude for what it is that God's given us and what he's made us to be is huge. It is huge. And so don't forget to be grateful for who you are, for how God's designed you, how he's made you to be. Think about your personality. You know, we all have our own personalities. You know, they're basically the personality test and all that. There are about 4 different kinds of personalities. But the truth is that we all, you know, even within those, there's variations, and we have our own unique personality. You know, and even though some personalities are maybe a little more pleasant than other personalities, things like that, God made us just the way we are. And it's important for us to embrace that personality God's given us. What about your creativity? You know, sometimes I'm amazed, you know, I like to observe things that people create. I'm just amazed at the creativity that people have. Passion. What about the things that you're passionate about? God gave you the capacity to be a passionate person, be passionate. Your skills. You know, some of you are very, very good at certain trades, at certain professions, and you're good at what you do. You're very skilled at what you do. And then also some have talents, and talent's something that God's given us, and then when someone develops that talent, what a blessing that is. And all of us are gifted in many different ways. And so whenever you understand that who you are is a gift from God, your very life itself is a gift from God, then it gives us an awareness that we should be grateful to him for this gift that he's given us. It starts with the basic premise that God loved us so much that he made us in his image, and then when we were fallen and away from him, that he not only sent his son, but he allowed his son to die in our place so that we could be reconnected, redeemed, brought back into right relationship with God. That's the value God puts on us. And so no matter what else you may feel or think, I want you to remember today that God values you more than you will ever imagine or think, and for you to embrace that. Now, here's another awareness, an awareness that many sources contribute to our life quality. God not only created us in this way and just put us here for us to kind of walk around, but he gave us a lot of things that contribute to that well-being, to our well-being. And sir, first of all, as I just mentioned, that relationship with him, the opportunity to have a relationship with him. Another thing is people. And people are one of the greatest blessings in our life, and they are also one of the greatest difficulties in our life. I saw a documentary recently where there was an older gentleman, he's like in his 70s, lives way out in the kind of in the wilderness, and it's not of West Virginia, I think it is, and he's on hundreds of acres and kind of isolated from people, but he takes in baby bears that are rescued, and he'll raise them, and then he'll turn them back to the wild. But as he was talking, as they were interacting with him, he said this statement that really kind of stood out to me very much. So he said, "I'll choose being around any animal over being around people." Now, that told me that man has some pain in his life, and he has some hurt from people. And he'd rather hang out with wild bear, and then he said sometimes he goes weeks on end without seeing anyone, and he will choose any animal over a person. And I, you know, the problem with that is God designed us to be in relationship with people. Certainly nothing wrong with, you know, having our pets and all those things as well, and that's another blessing as well. But God gives us in our lives, another something he gives to enrich our lives. But bottom line is, people is a high priority. And if we can learn to embrace the people in our lives and learn to embrace their hearts, embrace them, and realize that God puts people in our lives for us to connect with, us to be connected with, and for them to connect with us. And then also, I believe God uses groups of people. He uses organizations. He uses, you know, there are some times in our lives whenever a church experience has just been something very, very beneficial, very blessing to us, and very much of a blessing to us. And so it's made a huge difference. Maybe a small group we've been a part of, huge difference. Maybe a school that we attended, very big part of helping to shape us and be a part of us. And so God gives us all these contributing factors to add to the quality, to contribute to the quality of our lives. What about all the opportunities? You know, everyone in here, you've already had opportunities. In some cases, you've taken great advantage of those opportunities. You maybe missed a few opportunities, but there's always another opportunity. Have opportunities. What about the concept, the fact that as human beings, we're able to embrace the concept of love, of grace, of hope, and of joy? What about an awareness that this world that God has created with us is fragilely hinging on a whole lot of things going right, and yet God has it perfectly operating within that realm so that we're able to have the climates that we have, we're able to have the food that we have, the water that we have, we're able to have the beauty of nature all around us, which also reveals the Creator God as well. And so all of these things, whenever someone is grateful, they are grateful of these things that we see all around us, that we interact with, and we realize it comes from God. These are things that come from God. And then the third thing that I wanted to mention that we can be aware of, that if we really are a person of gratitude, this is something that typically we would notice about them. You have an awareness that gratitude does not require the absence of hardship. You know, if you've ever thought, well, if life would ever go well for me, I'd be grateful. Or if I didn't have these problems over here, or if this stuff wouldn't keep happening, then I could be grateful. We have to learn to be grateful in the midst of even difficulty. Because even, probably the greatest example in the Bible of someone who learned that or seemed to know that, and someone who loved God and walked with God, was Job. He said, the Lord has given and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He honored God when God gave him everything, and he had a lot. But he still honored God even when God took it away. Doesn't mean he understood it. Doesn't mean he could make perfect sense out of it. Doesn't mean that it was something that he was grateful that bad things happened. But he was still connected to God and understand that God was good even if bad things were happening. And that takes some maturity. That takes some sense of growing up. That takes some sense of development. But it's very much a part of having a true sense of gratitude. Now, the second thing I want to talk to you about in general is this. How does gratitude impact us? What kind of a difference does it make in our lives? And I did a quick analysis of Paul. Paul has written a number of books in the New Testament, and he's just a great influencer in the New Testament church. I mean, there's nobody that's ever lived that's like him, and he's just made such a remarkable mark for God in his lifetime. But also, probably very few people suffered as much as Paul did. Paul suffered a lot. He was thrown into prison. He was beaten. He was shipwrecked. I mean, he was bitten by a snake. He was all kinds of stuff that happened to him that went wrong in his life. But if you'll notice in his readings, there is a strong awareness of a spirit of gratitude that he has. And in fact, I started going through the different books at the beginning because I knew this was kind of the case, and I just started verifying. In Romans chapter 1, verse 8, he talks about being thankful for the people. 1 Corinthians 1:4, 2 Corinthians 1:3, he gives God praise for these people. He's always giving thanks for the opportunities for the people, for the churches, for the ones he's giving thanks to them. Ephesians 1:16, and Philippians 1:3, and Colossians 1:3. I just even quit right there. I'm going, here we go. I think there was one that didn't start off with him saying something about being thankful or grateful for the people, to God for the people. And so gratitude was hugely a part of his life. And every time he greeted people, he started off with this awareness of this gratitude that he had. And so it impacted him. And when I look at his life, I think some of the things we're going to talk about here are very reflective of how he lived. I believe one of the ways that gratitude impacts us is it motivates us. When you are grateful for today, you're going to be more likely to seize the day than to waste the day. When you're grateful for today, you remember it's a gift from God. This life is a gift from God. This day is a gift from God. So you seize the day. You understand that I'm alive now. I don't know how long I'll live, but I'm alive now. I can accomplish this. I can do this. It's not just about doing, but I can also be this kind of person. I can function this way. I'm able to do this. I can do something. So it motivates us. It also, I think, provides a release of very, very good feelings in the sense of, if you're a grouchy person and you go through your day being grouchy, at the end of the day, do you generally feel better? I just felt great for being a grouch all day. That just makes me so happy. I'm going to go home and I'm not going to kick a cat, and I'm going to be, because I got all my grouch out all day long. The grouchier you are, the grouchier you become. And because I'm tell you what happens, because a lot of times you get grouchy, people getting grouchy back at you. And so it gets worse and piles up and piles up and piles up. And so whenever it's just like, to me, whenever you live with a sense of gratitude, you're always giving out gratitude. It's just like this. Has anybody ever had what you call a good cry? Everybody had a good cry? When you have a good cry, you generally feel better after a good cry. If it's the right kind of cry, you just feel better. I think you feel better whenever you live a life of gratitude. It becomes who you are when you're thinking in terms of gratitude toward God, gratitude toward other people, gratitude for the things you have, for the opportunities that are yours. It helps you to function better. It tends to be contagious in the same sense that grouchiness is contagious. But gratitude is contagious in a very, very positive and meaningful way. It focuses on the good. Every day, if you go, well, I'm holding out for a perfect day. When I have a perfect day, I'm going to be a grateful person. Well, we might have that at your funeral, because every day has a lot of good, but it has some challenges. Every day has its own challenges as well. And so it helps us when we're a grateful person to pick up the good, to notice the good. And it doesn't mean ignore the bad or ignore the difficult, but not to dwell on it. I think it helps us to be not to be too self-focused. It's all about me, all about me. Whenever you're not grateful, there's a tendency to be very focused on ourselves. Virtuous. This is where I want you to take your little Romans 1:21 sheet, the little memory verse that you have, and I want you to look at that. It says, "For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened." Why did their thinking become futile and their foolish hearts darkened? Because they did not glorify him as God. They did not acknowledge him as God. They ignored him. They refused to give him the proper place in their lives. And they didn't thank him. And if you think about this, there are only two things mentioned here and it doesn't mean it's the only two things that can cause this, but two things mentioned here that will cause someone to live a life in darkness. And one of those is that they don't give thanks to God, that they don't express gratitude to God. And so what I want to encourage you to remember is this. If you do not embrace gratitude toward God, if you don't acknowledge God, then the scripture indicates, and there's a whole list of things that happened to people started doing that were against God's ways, against his plan in this chapter. Whenever they wouldn't glorify him, they would not give him thanks. And so they became darkened in their thinking. As a result, they ended up not honoring God at all and not being grateful people, just lost in the darkness. I think it's an indication also of the strength of character. When you're a person who's grateful, it says something about your character. And then also, one last thing that I'll mention on this, and that is that faith. I believe whenever you're a grateful person, it's an indication that you believe God is who he says he is and that you can rely on him. It gives you a sense of optimism, not just to be optimistic, because it's based in faith in who God is. Your outlook is more positive. Your outlook is better. In this thought, I was thinking about Caleb and Joshua, how they went out with the spies into the promised land to see what was out there. And they came back with a report of these really big people and this really awesome food. And Joshua and Caleb were like, man, we can do this. Do you know that big people fall harder? And, that's some really good food over there. I mean, God gave it to us. Let's go do it. I believe that their hearts they had faith. They had faith that the God who had given this, who had promised them this, he would fulfill it. They trusted him. And I believe the more that we have a grateful heart for what God has said to us, what he's done, what his word tells us, that we will be greater people of faith. It will affect us in those ways. Now, this is a quote from the Wall Street Journal, and I just thought it was interesting. And it's based on some studies, and didn't say exactly, I don't have the specific studies mentioned, but it says this: adults who feel grateful have more energy, more optimism, more social connections, and more happiness than those who do not, according to studies conducted over the past decade. They're also less likely to be depressed, envious, greedy, or alcoholics. I thought that was just an interesting statement. It doesn't, they're not necessarily, they're basing it on studies, they're not necessarily basing it on God's word. But the truth is, something that's true is true no matter where it comes from. And the fact is that when you have a grateful heart, it deeply impacts your whole being, everything about you, who you are. And if you don't have a grateful heart, it'll deeply impact you as well. You're marked by being a person of gratitude or not. Now, I want to just quickly mention three areas or three arenas of gratitude. And the first one is the past. It's very important, I think, in a time of Thanksgiving in particular. I think it's important always to be aware of things in our past that we are grateful for. And to kind of even almost, have some of those things in our memory bank. Because sometimes in the moment we may feel challenged, we feel a little bit beat up. And if we can reflect back and we can remember God's faithfulness to us in this time, and this time, and this time, and the gratitude that we have for how this person was there and they helped us, and how this circumstance worked in our favor. And if we can reflect back and think of those things, it will help us a lot of times right in the moment. The children of Israel were encouraged to have the Feast of the Passover every year. It was a reminder to them of God's faithfulness to spare the oldest child when the blood was put over the doorposts of their homes. And it was a reminder that they were rescued from slavery, and that they were brought to a new place. And so they celebrated that every year. They would remember what God had done. I think it's very important to have some remembrances of what God has done in your life, to never forget where you were without him, to never forget how things were at another time. Not to dwell on that, but to remember it and be grateful to God for how he has redeemed you, for how he's brought you from this place to this place, and also for the amazing things that maybe happened in your life in the past. Have a strong memory of some things that you're grateful for. Then in the present, Matthew chapter 6 tells us that each day has enough difficulties of its own. Sometimes we'll sit in today and we're so worried about 10 years from now or 5 years from now. And I'm not saying don't pay attention to what's out ahead of you. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is you can only live in this day. This is the only day you have right now. You have to live in this day. So anything that you're planning, anything that you're projecting, anything that you're looking forward to, we know that that's an if and a maybe. And so we handle it lightly. And so we in the present. So what do I have to be thankful for today? You say, well, if I win the lottery, then I'll really be thankful. Or if this happens, I'll really be happy and I'll be grateful. Or when this happens, when I get that job promotion, when I get this, when I get that, when I get the other. The Bible reminds us that today is a day of salvation. It reminds us that this is the day the Lord has made. Today is the day God has designed for us to live in his presence, to live in his salvation, to live with an awareness of his hand on our lives, and to be grateful for that. If we wait to be grateful, we might end up waiting too long. And then for the future, Philippians chapter 4, verse 6, it tells us that we are in our petitions, in the things that we bring before the Lord in prayer, that we are to, I'll just read it to you, verse 6, it says this: do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. If you're bringing a request to God, typically it's something that hasn't happened yet. It's something you're anticipating, something you're praying for, praying about. It might be for someone's salvation. It might be for a need that you have. It might, whatever it might be, but it's something generally out there for your future. It says whenever you're praying, when you bring a request, when you bring a petition to the Lord, do it with a spirit of thanksgiving. And that goes back to this issue of faith, a confidence that God hears our prayers. Not only did he hear our prayers, but he actually works in behalf of this person, so we anticipate. And our gratitude is a demonstration of our faith in what he will do. Not that we can tell him exactly what to do and how to do it, but we have presented to the Lord, and we anticipate. With grateful anticipation, we wait to see how God will work and how he will accomplish what it is that he wants to accomplish. Now, I'm going to give you an assignment as we go into this as Thanksgiving week. And you say, I didn't come to church to get an assignment. Well, you're here, and I'm going to give one. You can do with it what you want to do. Obviously, you have a free will here. You don't have to do it, but I'm going to, and it isn't. It's actually, you can pick and choose a little bit, okay? But I believe this. I believe the way that we actually become a grateful person is we start practicing being grateful. We have to start practicing. And you may already be there, or you may feel like you're just at the place you need to be, and if that's great, you just, say amen to everything we say here. But if you feel like you could stand to improve in this area, then you may want to pay attention or, jot something down if it strikes you as something that maybe you would do. One of the things is to consider starting a gratitude journal. A journal that's just dedicated to things that you are grateful for. And you can have a past part of that. You can, write down some things from the past in there. You can, but, maybe that you thought of in that given day, but just keep it, with that day, whatever day it is, that you open it up and you start writing in it, that you just jot down some things that you're thankful for and that you're grateful for. Maybe even just within that day, or you can go back, or things that you're praying for the future, that you're thanking God for in advance. But consider starting it, and maybe keep it by your bedside. And on days that maybe you don't write something down, maybe pick it up and just read it a little bit and reflect on it. Maybe sit down with your spouse and read some of it to them. Because I'm sure in there you probably said something about you were thankful for them in some way. Pretty sure, right? And maybe read it to your children, because you probably put something in there about them as well. Maybe read it to them. And so just before going to sleep, maybe list a few positive things, or, things. It doesn't have to be positive. There's something you're grateful for that happened that day. Our tendency is to focus on the things that went wrong that day. That's our tendency. Can't believe they said that to me. I can't believe that happened. I can't believe, just sort of get focused and caught up a little bit of that. Discipline our mind to think about the things that we are thankful for, that we have gratitude for. Another thing is to just try to, on a regular basis, recognize and acknowledge what your spouse has done for you. Maybe you left a article of clothing in some place you know it didn't belong. You came back later and you saw it was gone. You said, did you pick that up? And they said, yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I know that was my responsibility. Thank you for doing that. And so I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to get scolded for it. Show your gratitude. Whatever it is, something thoughtful, something kind, something nice that your spouse has done, thank them for something they've done to make your life a little better, to acknowledge, to show their love for you. What about your children? I think I've said this before, but we occasionally try to have a yes day. It's kind of hard, and you never can make it 100% through the day with all yeses. But but a lot of things that we say no to are just things that are inconvenient for us. Can you throw the ball right now? No. Can you have a tea party? No. It's things that there's nothing wrong with them. Just may not be fitting into our schedule right now. So occasionally maybe think in terms of having something like a yes day for your kids. But even if you don't do that, think in terms of whenever you catch them doing the right thing, because so many times we catch them doing the wrong thing. When you catch them doing the right thing, then if you would just simply make sure that you let them know you caught them doing that and tell them you're so grateful that they have that kind of heart, they have that kind of spirit. Whenever they actually give something to their sibling and you didn't make them do it, they did it just because they were being nice, to acknowledge that, to let them know that you're grateful for that kindness. Co-workers, maybe everybody you work with is a bozo, but they might think the same thing. Remember that. But your coworkers, if you just show some gratitude toward them, typically speaking, people do nice things for each other. They help each other out. Think in terms of showing gratitude to them. People you interact with throughout the day. It could just be casual interaction, grocery store, any place. Just people you come across your path as you interact with them, that you would show gratitude to them. Thank people for simple little things, because you're practicing gratitude. You're practicing. And they say, well, that wasn't anything. You can just say to them, well, I'm practicing being a grateful person, so it's a big deal to me, And just put it into practice every time you can, everything you can think of to do. Please show gratitude to people. Not only will strengthen your relationships, I think it will actually make you a more pleasant person for yourself and for other people as well. What about just before you even put your feet on the floor? Just when you wake up, just say, God, I'm so grateful to be alive today. I'm so grateful for this new day. I'm so grateful for this new opportunity. I'm so grateful to you for all the opportunities that I'm going to have. And giving me this new sheet of paper, a brand new day to write on. And then a few things for you to remember. And so whether whether that you do or whatever, I'm going to obviously leave it to you, but I would encourage you to do so. I also would encourage you when you sit down with Thanksgiving, whether it's just you and your spouse, or whether it's you and your spouse and children, or whether it's with a larger set of family members or friends, that as much as possible, unless you're just not in charge at all in the situation, but as much as possible, try to encourage everybody to go around the table and just say something they're thankful for, or to go around the table and say a person in that setting that they're thankful for and why they're thankful for them. Get people to actually act on and say something that they maybe just don't think about to say every day. And then just some things to remember. As I mentioned earlier, gratitude costs nothing to practice. There are a lot of things that you can, if you practice dancing, you practice this, you practice the other, you have to pay to have someone coach you do it. You don't have to pay anything for practicing gratitude. It's free. And then anyone can do it. Anyone. Everybody in this room can practice gratitude. You say, well, I don't want to. Well, that's a different case. But you can do it. And if you're going to do it, you have to want to. You have to have a want to. It won't get you in trouble. Have you ever heard of somebody getting in trouble for being too grateful? If this person tells me thank you one more time, or if my kid tells me thank you one more time, I'm going to spank them, You won't get in trouble for having gratitude. It won't get you in trouble. And it can be practiced any place. Any place. You can practice at home, you can practice at work, you can practice at church, you can practice it at a gas station, you can practice it in the mall, you can practice it any place you are. You can practice gratitude any place. It's always available. And I believe practice, like anything else, will make you better at it. It will become more ingrained into who you are. It will have deep, deep impact on your life. If you remember to give God glory and to give him thanks, you'll walk in the light. You'll walk in a good place. You'll walk in a place of a God-honoring place. And you just might be surprised at all the personal benefits that can come to you by being a grateful person. Say, well, I've kind of gotten comfortable being grouchy, Well, maybe now would be a good time, maybe this year, this season, this Thanksgiving week. it would be a good time to try something new that might really add value to your life. Remember, God has given us all that we are. He's helped design us. He made us in his image. He said, I came to give you life to the full. All of these things are from his hand. And all these other things we talked about to impact that. We have so much to be thankful for. I'm going to ask you, if you would, to bow your heads for a moment of prayer. And we're going to, I'm stopping a little bit early so that you will be grateful people today. And so that you'll come back tonight. And at 6 o'clock, try to remember to come here at 6 o'clock. And so we're going to invite, I know Vanjie and some of the other band members might be over in Kids Church. So we may sing for you. We may not.